The story begins with Noah, a pizza delivery driver, on a quiet evening in a suburban neighborhood. He pulls up to Mrs. Ellison's house, a modest but well-kept home. The atmosphere is calm and familiar, with the distance of cars passing by and the comforting scent of pizza filling the air. As Noah rings the doorbell, he notices the house is a little colder than expected, and Mrs. Ellison, an older woman with graying hair and a gentle smile, answers the door. She seems polite but distant, as though her mind is elsewhere. Her hands shake as she hands Noah a generous tip, but it's clear she's hiding something. There's a subtle unease in her eyes. As Noah turns to leave, Mrs. Ellison suddenly asks, have you ever heard of the test? Her voice is soft, almost like she's speaking to herself. Noah brushes it off as nothing more than on small talk, but the words linger in his mind. As the door clicks shut behind him, Noah glances back and notices a faint shadow moving behind the curtains just beyond his line of sight. It's a fleeting moment, but the sensation of something being amiss hangs in the air. A cold wind stirs, and Noah quickly walks back to his car. But as he starts the engine, he can't shake the feeling that something is very wrong. What did Mrs. Ellison mean by the test? Why was she so unnerved? The next evening, as Noah makes his usual rounds, he finds himself driving past Mrs. Ellison's house again. He notices two unfamiliar men standing at the edge of her porch, speaking in hushed tones. The men glance at Noah as he slows down, their eyes briefly meeting his. The exchange feels off, almost as though they're waiting for something or someone. Noah doesn't stop. His unease grows, and he hurries on. As he drives away, his mind keeps returning to the strange encounter. Why were those men at Mrs. Ellison's house? What were they whispering about? His gut instinct tells him something isn't right. That night, Noah receives a call from an unknown number, but when he answers, there's nothing but silence on the other end. It feels like an eerie warning. His sense of unease deepens, and he wonders if he's somehow involved in something he doesn't understand. The following day, unable to ignore his growing curiosity, Noah decides to return to Mrs. Ellison's house. As he walks up to the porch, he notices the front door slightly ajar, the chill of the evening air creeping in. He hesitates, feeling the weight of the situation, but steps inside. Anyway, the house is unnervingly quiet, darker than it should be, and the air feels colder than outside. Something about the stillness sends a shiver down Noah's spine. Noah steps cautiously into Mrs. Ellison's dimly lit house, the door creaking as he enters. The cold air inside is unnatural, sending a chill through him. He stands still for a moment, trying to get his bearings. The house is quiet, far too quiet, as if it's holding its breath. The faint scent of fresh bread lingers in the air, but it feels stale, as if the bread has been sitting for hours. Noah's footsteps echo as he makes his way deeper into the home, each room darker than the last. As he walks down a narrow hallway, he spots a small study tucked away in the back of the house. The door is slightly cracked open. Curiosity pulls him in, but the sense of foreboding grows stronger. Inside, the room is a mix of clutter and strange, eerie symbols drawn on the walls. There's a dusty old book on a small table, its pages filled with cryptic writings about tests and choices. Noah runs his fingers over the pages, his mind racing with questions. Suddenly, the house groans, and the hairs on the back of Noah's neck stand up. A soft fills the air, vibrating through the walls. He looks up, startled, but no one is there. His heart pounds in his chest as he slowly turns, instinctively feeling that someone is watching him. His breath catches in his throat. He isn't alone. Just as Noah begins to feel the weight of the house's oppressive silence, Mrs. Ellison steps into the room. But something's wrong. Her once worn, tired face is now glowing with an unnerving vitality. Her eyes are sharp, alert, and strangely calm, and her posture is more rigid than before. She seems younger, her lips curled, a faint, almost knowing smile in her voice. When she speaks, has a strange hypnotic quality. You found it, haven't you? She asks, her gaze flickering to the book in Noah's hands. He tries to speak, but the words catch in his throat. She continues, her tone colder now. This was meant for you. Noah steps back, his mind reeling. What do you mean? What's going on here? His voice is shaky with a mix of fear and confusion. Mrs. Ellison's smile widens, but it's not reassuring. She explains that the house, the symbols, the strange occurrences, they're all part of a test he has unknowingly been a part of since the moment he met her. She tells him that the men outside are agents, sent to observe him. His kindness, his willingness to help, all of it has been part of a much bigger plan. The test is about choices and sacrifice, and Noah must now decide what he's willing to give up. Suddenly, the air feels heavier, and the walls seem to close in around him. Mrs. Ellison steps closer, her presence overpowering. You're not leaving until you make a decision, she warns, her voice low and cold. Noah's heart pounds as Mrs. Ellison's words sink in. The air in the room feels thick, almost suffocating, and his pulse quickens as he tries to make sense of what she's saying. The cryptic symbols, the men lurking outside, the strange call. Everything suddenly feels connected. His mind races as he struggles to understand what the test truly means. Mrs. Ellison's smile remains cold and knowing. She explains that the test is not just for her. It's for Noah, too. His kindness has drawn them in, but now he must prove his worthiness to continue. A decision he faces is a matter of sacrifice. Something or someone must be given up. It's not a choice between good and bad, but between two impossible options. As Noah stares at her, a cold realization hits him. He's been a part of this game all along, unknowingly helping to set the stage for whatever is coming. The walls seem to press in, and the house grows darker. The men outside are closing in, their silhouettes barely visible through the frosted windows. There's no way out, no easy escape. Mrs. Ellison takes a step closer, her eyes glowing. "You have no choice but to decide, Noah," she whispers. "Choose wisely. Everything depends on you now." Noah feels trapped, the weight of the situation almost too much to bear. He's forced to make a decision he doesn't fully understand. Will he follow her lead or defy her? Either way, the consequences will be dire. Noah's mind spins as Mrs. Ellison's words echo in his head. The choice she's presenting feels impossible. Every instinct tells him to run, but the door is locked and the windows are blocked. The house feels like a prison, its walls closing in with every passing second. The men outside are getting closer, their presence looming, silent but threatening. The tension in the air is unbearable, the weight of the situation pressing on him from all sides. Mrs. Ellison's eyes never leave him, her gaze piercing as she waits for his response. The fear in Noah's chest turns to a cold gnawing dread. His thoughts race. If he refuses, will they harm him? If he gives in, what will happen to him, to those he cares about? There's no clear answer, no escape from the labyrinth of decisions she's forced him into. Noah takes a shaky step forward, his hands trembling. "What do you want from me, Oath?" he demands, trying to regain some control. Mrs. Ellison's smile widens, her voice low and almost amused. "I don't want anything, Noah. The choice is yours, but be careful. Your decision will reveal who you truly are." As the words sink in, the cold that fills the house grows louder, a warning. Noah knows he can't put it off any longer. The men outside are closing in, and the decision must be made now. Noah's heart races as he faces the decision. He's trapped with nowhere to turn. The house feels like it's alive, every corner whispering with secrets, every shadow hiding something unknown. Mrs. Ellison's smile remains cold and calculating. The men outside are almost at the door now, their presence palpable, and Noah knows that whatever happens next will change everything. In a moment of clarity, Noah realizes the decision isn't just about him. It's about the people he's met along the way. Mrs. Ellison's cryptic words, the strange symbols, the test, they're all part of something much bigger, something that's been in motion for years. The test he now understands is not only about sacrifice, but also about trust. Who will he trust? Mrs. Ellison, who seems to hold all the answers but is shrouded in mystery, or his own instincts which scream at him to run? His mind flashes to the men outside. They are not just observers. They're agents, part of an ancient system. His decision will either align him with them or set him against them. In either way, his life will never be the same. But it's not just about him anymore, of the fate of those he cares about. The very fabric of reality, as he knows it, is at risk. Noah takes a deep breath and steps forward, determined to make a choice. But the moment he moves, a sharp sound pierces the air, a door slamming, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. Noah freezes at the sound of footsteps behind him. His blood runs cold as he turns around, his mind racing. The men outside have entered, their dark silhouettes filling the doorway. Mrs. Ellison's smile falters for just a moment, as if something unexpected has happened. The room grows darker, the walls closing in tighter, and Noah feels the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knows that this is it, the point of no return. The men move closer, their faces obscured in shadow. One of them, tall and imposing, steps forward and speaks with a low, gravelly voice. "Do you know what you must do?" he says, his words dripping with an eerie finality. "Choose now, or we will make the choice for you." Noah feels his chest tighten with panic. He knows his decision will determine everything. The path he walks, the people he saves, and the dark secrets he must face. Mrs. Ellison's eyes gleam with anticipation, and for a brief moment Noah wonders if she's been manipulating him all along. But deep down he knows the decision lies with him alone. With a sharp breath he makes his choice. Unsure if he's doing the right thing, but certain that he cannot remain a passive participant in this strange, dangerous game any longer. As the words leave his mouth, the room shifts, the air grows thick with tension, the very fabric of reality seeming to bend. As soon as Noah's choice leaves his lips, the world around him shifts violently. The once dimly lit house blurs, the walls pulsating with an otherworldly energy. The men outside stop moving, their faces unreadable as they stand frozen, as if Noah's words have triggered a chain reaction. Mrs. Ellison's smile fades, replaced by a look of deep satisfaction, but it's not a relief. It's something darker. The room begins to warp, the very air bending, as if the rules of reality are being rewritten. Noah's heart races and his instincts scream for him to run, but he's rooted to the spot. His choice has set something in motion, and it's beyond his control now. The house trembles, and the ground beneath his feet seems to shift. He can feel the tension in the air, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. As the world twists, pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place. The test was never just about sacrifice. It was about the choice to defy fate itself. Noah realizes that the men outside weren't just agents. They were part of something ancient, a force that controls the very fabric of reality. His choice has either aligned him with them or pushed him into direct opposition. But before he can process it all, the ground cracks open beneath him. The house, the men, Mrs. Ellison, they all fade away, replaced by an empty, surreal landscape. The test is far from over.